is there any way that given the record or the data that the traffic police and everybody is basically recording, can you model something? Can you say that, okay, this is the time that you better start? This is what you get as a common man, as a taxpayer money, because the government of India will build supercomputers on taxpayers' money. I pay taxes, you pay taxes. That's the implications. Now, let's come to some of the challenges. So now, after spending such a huge computers, I am asking a question honestly to myself and the community. Are we prepared to leverage that? Do you have enough engineers who can actually write programs to leverage the kind of facility that you have, the kind of data that you are having? Can you have that? So that's a challenge. That's an open challenge. Our education system is supporting, and we need to remodel. If we need to align that with our growth plan, we talk about GDPs and all, our education system needs little bit revamp. That we have to work together. And the other aspect what I want to bring is the kind of electricity that you need to basically support this kind of huge computers. So right now, the fastest supercomputer that needs around 18 megawatt is of the order of that. And we are talking about 1,000 times faster of that computer in an exascale era. So think about how much electricity that you need, and Bangalore's average electricity consumption per day is around 2,800 megawatt. That's a huge challenge, because we are not able to supply electricity to all of our villages in India, but we are thinking about building a supercomputer of that range. That's a challenge. That's what I'm proposing. So we need to solve. Maybe the semiconductor industry is facing the same thing. We should learn from each other and then come up with something. And finally, what I want to say is, I am involved with the IEEE conference on HPC. It's called HIPC that happens every December. I am the vice general co-chair for that. And I'm seeing, I'm in the part of building the ecosystem of HPC in India, and I'm seeing what's happening. So the real challenge what I face is the kind of skills that you are having. Among 500 participants, you have so many students, but how many quality research papers or quality work that is getting reported out of India? In this context, I think it's very, very important, and it's time to address. I think by this, I think I should hand over to the other speakers, and we'll take questions afterwards.
Yes, Chiranjeev, what we'll do is that let's go towards Hemant. Hemant is from Intel. I think you asked a very pertinent question that if we really need to go towards exascale, what is the semiconductor industry really going to do to solve the power issue? You wonderfully articulated there's an opportunity, there's also challenges. And you have thoughts around that, Hemant?
Yeah, sure. You guys hear me?
Yes, it's working.
Okay, so let's see, I think Chiranjeev has articulated a lot of things, and I'll just expand on that a little more. I'm a CPU architect by profession, so you will see a bias towards things that excite us, me as a CPU developer and as Intel, right? So let's put some things in perspective on, we talk about exascale. What does it really mean, right? And we talk about the supercomputer in China. We talk about, today it's about a 50 petaflop per second machine, right? We are looking at about a 20x improvement on raw compute to get to exascale. And by the way, when we talk about exascale, right, the one perspective that we should also have is this vision is a 15 to 20 year vision, right? We should really appreciate the fact that this vision, we've seen things in research papers and such. It is this kind of thinking that lays out that in 2022, I will build a exascale machine. Today, with what China has for TH2, we are still 20x behind. We're talking about 18 megawatts of power. We want to be able to deliver to that kind of compute with the same amount of power, right? Similar power, 20 megawatts. So that makes energy efficiency about 15x, right? You talk about memory bandwidths, you talk about memory capacity, because high performance computing is all about compute, memory bandwidth, moving data, right? And storage, right? And so you look at the system and say every aspect of this needs several orders of magnitude of improvement, right? So just to throw out some numbers. Today, this supercomputer that we're talking about is about 1.4 petabyte of memory, and we're talking about increasing that by 50x, right? So 50x the memory, 15x the energy efficiency, 20x the inter-node bandwidth. And then when you talk about the amount of parallelism that we're trying to go after, right? Just in terms of nodes, it's about 16,000 nodes today, it's going to 100,000+ nodes. If you look at concurrency in terms of how many jobs you can run in parallel, it is about 1 billion jobs, right? Today we are at about 1 million jobs. You need to go to about 1 billion jobs. So this is the magnitude, and this is clearly something that as computer engineers and semiconductor, it could be a multinational company, it could be the academics. This is the problem in front of us, and we haven't solved it, right? We have to go still demonstrate, and to be able to do that, there have to be innovations, everything from how do you build these circuits, how to make it energy efficient, right? How do you fundamentally change the architecture of how data moves, right? Will the standard paradigms of how we build memory and storage today work? Do we need a different memory hierarchy, right? Do we need memory to sit closer to compute or compute to sit closer to memory? Do we need a higher level of system integration that we've never seen before? So these are some of the challenges, and I think while we're talking about the National Supercomputing Mission and such, I think that's a great start. But when we talk about exascale computing, there's still a lot of grounds up opportunities that we should go after. And it is, I would say, why exascale? I think it's well articulated that the problem statements that you can solve. And a simple example could be, let's talk about when computational fluid dynamics came into the realm of HPC. It fundamentally changed the way we do design, right? If you take Boeing and the way they were doing their wind tunnels and their designs and so on, instead of having to build 100 prototypes, physical prototypes which do actual experimentation and then deduce and then build your design, it's all done through simulation now. Right? Just look at the impact that can create. So these are the fundamental changes that can happen when you get into exascale computing. And we normally tend to associate it with, here's a model, I need to simulate it. And so there's scientific compute, there is weather and climate, there is oil and gas research and so on. But there's the other dimension that I think we should talk about as well is, big data is a big fad today, right? And everybody talks about big data. And quickly, if you look at the surface of it, the amount of data we talk about, the business analytics that runs over it, workload-wise and the architecture of the systems that you build, it is a little different. However, quickly, as you look at the kinds of services that we are trying to get out of big data, right? It could be real-time services that we try to extract through data analytics and business analytics. The type of problems, the type of models that you have to create is very much HPC. So there is a coming together of what was traditionally scientific compute with what is a little more palatable from, what does business analytics mean and what does it mean to business. And there are statistics that, for example, IDC puts out, right? I read a recent statistic that every dollar you invest in business analytics returns $500 in return, right? So it makes a lot of business sense. And then the other perspective we should bring about is, in India, we have problems of scale and spades, right? Chiranjeev alluded to it. There's transportation, the government talks about crop insurance. My colleague and I the other day were discussing that. How do you operationalize it, right? How do you operationalize crop insurance? It can be a big data problem. It is a high performance computing problem. The other perspective that I recently got was Indian Railways. Look at the, modernizing the Indian Railways. There is about 1 lakh kilometers of tracks. There is 20,000 locomotives. About 9 billion passengers, 1 billion tons of freight. And if you start talking about how do you modernize it, how do you do predictive maintenance and preventive maintenance instead of the way we do maintenance today, right? How do you, make sure that the trail never gets derailed? How do you do track maintenance, right? And in bits and pieces, we do have the infrastructure. We have, across the length and breadth of these 1 lakh tracks, 1 lakh kilometer tracks, there is a fiber channel network that runs, right? So we have multinationals in here who have the capability to build sensors. We have multinationals who can contribute to compute. We have multinationals who can contribute to the linking to the network, right? We have startups who can contribute, and we have academia who can do research. And this, I think, is a multifaceted problem, and we have to come up with a win-win way for all of these different disciplines to come together and make it count for problems that matter to our day-to-day living.
Dheman, I said this articulated is that there are challenges as you build an infrastructure, there are challenges when you have changes around it. And Daniel, you and I were talking a little bit, if my memory serves me right, you're one of those few who loves change. You went from the electrical side into parallel programming side. And if you can share with the audience here some of the experiences and the joy of changing and understanding the other aspect of it, maybe our audience can take something back home.
I will try my very best. So also welcome from my side. I'm quite happy to be here and I'm excited to talk to you guys. I'm also quite happy that only half of you guys is playing on the cell phone. So this is also very great. And only a few seem to fall asleep after lunch. So hopefully we will get that a bit more up in the Q&A session later. But thanks for inviting me. Before I start with some comments on it, I would like to say that, well, I'm working with Siemens, and I would like to know our oil and gas colleague, yeah? You do not really need to bother about that. You can just buy that at Siemens, right? Okay.
No. Given the oil price below $30 a barrel, yes, I need to. Yeah.
It's a matter of perspective. We can negotiate. Nonetheless, so thinking about, so maybe a little bit of background. So I wrote code running on HPC systems up to several hundred thousands of codes, so more than 200,000 of cores my code was running, while I was simultaneously writing code, or previously writing code, running on a very small ARM-based embedded cell phone, where I actually wrote a sampler code to make it running better. So I have the full experience between very little tiny pieces of software and code and the huge machines. And what I constantly think about once it comes to HPC is the following. It's HPC ecosystems are quite expensive. Yeah? And you can build huge exascale computers. You can build medium clusters. You can build small clusters. You can connect them. All that is possible. But the main purpose of this needs to be clear. So you have to have an application for this. Why would you really want to invest hundreds of millions of dollars into one single or a few clusters? Why would you want to invest this? There needs to be some kind of idea what the application is supposed to be. Yeah? And looking from the application perspective, yeah, things are changing a bit. Yeah? If you think about what are potential applications, yeah, some perspectives get different. Maybe for my colleagues from Intel and from NVIDIA, yeah, they are the hardware vendors. If you just buy the hardware, they earn the money. Yeah?
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully, yes. Exactly. So, but the purpose of this shall be that actually you earn the money, right? And you can earn the money with the stuff you do with these computers. So I would have a way more careful look into the applications. And once you think about supercomputers, which kind of applications immediately come to your mind? Well, you said that already, nuclear bombs, right? These are certainly not things where you can earn money with. Yeah, so let's call it fundamental science. This is nothing where you really can earn money with. But you can earn money with a lot of data analytics, with a lot of, with all this stuff where you need to combine information in a massively parallel way and transform these data into some higher level knowledge. Yeah? And some examples were